Screams of agony echoed through the blood-soaked streets of the war-torn Iridian village, most of the reptilian aliens already slaughtered or left to die by the rival clan. Joshua Reed, a rugged human space explorer, picked his way through the carnage, carbine rifle scanning for movement. He spotted it, a mortally wounded Iridian male named Taurus, guts hanging from a deep slash across his belly, gasping for breath amid the bodies of his butchered clan. Joshua approached cautiously, keeping his weapon trained on the alien. The Iridians had no love for humans, viewing them as primitive savages. But as Joshua looked into Taurus's pain-filled eyes, he saw a desperate plea for help. "My mate," Taurus croaked in broken English. "My hatchlings, trapped in caves. Zorgax will kill them." Joshua's jaw tightened. He knew all about Zorgax, the brutal leader of a rival Iridian clan known for his vicious cruelty. Glancing around at the devastated village, Joshua realized that none of the other Iridians were going to help Taurus's family. They'd written them off as acceptable losses in their never-ending clan wars. But Joshua couldn't just leave them to die. Maybe it was his human nature, or maybe he just had a soft spot for the underdog. Either way, he knew what he had to do. "I'll get them out," Joshua said, checking his ammo. "Point me to those caves and I'll bring your family back alive." Taurus's eyes widened in shock. A human, offering to help an Iridian. It was unheard of. But with his life ebbing away and no other options, Taurus had no choice but to trust this strange, carnivorous primate. "Northeast," Taurus gasped. "Beyond river. Hurry before Zorgax finds them." Joshua nodded grimly, knowing he was about to embark on a suicide mission. The Iridian landscape was treacherous, teeming with predators and hazards that would make short work of any human, and Zorgax's warriors were ruthless killers who would show no mercy to anyone who crossed them. But Joshua had never been one to back down from a challenge. Humanity didn't get to the stars by playing it safe. Sometimes you had to dive head first into the fire and trust your wits and skills to see you through. Even if it meant facing certain death to save a bunch of alien lizards, who would probably never even thank you. But that was just the kind of crazy, carnivorous bastard that Joshua Reed was. And if he was going to die on this godforsaken planet, he was going to go out with a bang, taking as many of Zorgax's goons with him as he could. Gripping his rifle tight, Joshua set off toward the distant caves, ready to show the Iridians what a true apex predator could do. Joshua pushed through the dense foliage of Iridia, his senses on high alert. The training he'd received in the human expeditionary forces kicked in as he deftly avoided the deadly flora and fauna of the alien world. His enhanced hearing picked up the slightest rustling of leaves, allowing him to sidestep a venomous serpent coiled in the undergrowth. As he neared the caves where Taurus's family was trapped, Joshua's keen eyes spotted movement ahead. A group of Zorgax's scouts, their reptilian features twisted into snarls of aggression. Joshua didn't hesitate. He raised his pulse rifle and fired, the advanced human weapon making short work of the Iridian's primitive armor. The scouts fell, their bodies twitching as the rifle's rounds tore through them. But one managed to activate a distress beacon before Joshua's shot found its mark. The human cursed under his breath. Zorgax would know he was coming now. Joshua sprinted for the caves, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside he found Arya and the hatchlings cowering in the darkness, their eyes wide with fear. Joshua approached slowly, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "I'm here to help," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Your mate sent me." Arya hesitated, her instincts warring with her desperation. Finally she nodded, gathering the hatchlings close. Joshua led them out of the caves, his senses straining for any sign of danger. They didn't make it far before Zorgax and his warriors appeared, their weapons aimed at Joshua and the Iridians. The human didn't flinch. He pushed Arya and the hatchlings behind him, shielding them with his body. "Surrender, human," Zorgax hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You cannot hope to defeat us." Joshua just smirked, his finger tightening on the trigger of his rifle. "I've faced worse odds before," he said, his voice steady, "and I've always come out on top." The battle was fierce, a blur of claws and blades and pulse rifle fire. Joshua moved like a dancer, his reflexes honed by years of training and combat. He dodged and weaved, using his smaller size and agility to outmaneuver the larger Iridians. But even Joshua had his limits. As more of Zorgax's warriors poured into the fray, the human found himself being pushed back, his rifle growing hot in his hands. Arya and the hatchlings huddled behind him, their cries of fear piercing the air. Just as it seemed all was lost, a new sound filled the air. The roar of human dropships, their engines screaming as they descended from the sky. Marines poured out, their weapons blazing as they engaged Zorgax's forces. The tide turned in an instant. Zorgax's warriors fell back, their ranks thinned by the human reinforcements. Zorgax himself let out a roar of rage, his eyes burning with hatred as he glared at Joshua. "This isn't over, human," he snarled, his voice a promise of retribution. "I will have my revenge." With that, the Iridian leader retreated, his remaining forces falling back into the jungle. Joshua let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his muscles aching with fatigue. He turned to Arya and the hatchlings, a weary smile on his face. "Let's get you back to your mate," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. The journey back to the ruined village was short, the Marines providing escort. Taurus was waiting, his wounds bandaged, but his eyes filled with gratitude as he saw his family safe and sound. But there was no time for reunions. Joshua's comm unit crackled to life, an urgent message from his superiors filling the air. The human's face grew grim as he listened, his jaw tightening with determination. Joshua listened intently to the urgent message from his superiors, his brow furrowing as the details became clear. A group of human colonists on a nearby moon were under attack by a faction of Iridians who had sided with Zorgax. The colonists, who had been attempting to establish peaceful relations with the Iridians, were now facing annihilation. Joshua glanced at Taurus and his family, conflicting emotions warring within him. He felt a duty to protect his fellow humans, but he had also developed a newfound respect for Taurus and his kind. Making a decision, Joshua turned to Taurus. "I need your help," he said, his voice low and serious. "Human colonists on a nearby moon are under attack by Iridians loyal to Zorgax. I can't leave them to die." Taurus met Joshua's gaze, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and determination. "I will fight by your side, Joshua. I owe you a debt, and I will prove that not all Iridians are like Zorgax." Joshua nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. He turned to the Marines, issuing orders for the rescue mission. As they prepared to depart, Joshua couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. The journey to the moon was short, but as they approached, Joshua and Taurus could see the extent of the devastation. The human colony was in ruins, with smoke billowing from the makeshift fortress that the colonists had erected. Surrounding the fortress was a large Iridian force, their weapons trained on the human defenses. Joshua's eyes narrowed as he spotted the Iridian commander, a massive, scarred warrior known as Craxus. He was one of Zorgax's most ruthless lieutenants, known for his brutality and cunning. As the dropships touched down, Joshua and Taurus led the charge, their weapons blazing. The Iridians returned fire, their energy weapons searing the air. Joshua ducked and weaved, his pulse rifle spitting death as he advanced. Taurus fought by his side, his Iridian blade flashing in the dim light. He shouted commands to the Marines, using his knowledge of Iridian tactics to outmaneuver the enemy. The battle was fierce, with casualties mounting on both sides. Joshua gritted his teeth as he saw a Marine fall, his chest burned away by an Iridian blast, but he pushed forward, determined to reach the colonists. Finally, they fought their way into the heart of the Iridian command center. There they found Craxus, his eyes glinting with malice as he spotted Joshua and Taurus. "So the human and the traitor have come to die together," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Joshua raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "We've come to stop you, Craxus. Your reign of terror ends here." Craxus laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You fools, this is just the beginning. Zorgax has plans for this entire sector, and you cannot hope to stop him. With a roar, Craxus charged, his blade flashing. Joshua and Taurus met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a brutal dance of death. The two warriors fought as one, their movements perfectly synchronized as they battled their common foe. Craxus was a formidable opponent, his strength and speed enhanced by Iridian technology. But Joshua and Taurus were fueled by a deep, unbreakable bond forged in the heat of battle. In the end, it was that bond that proved the difference. With a final, desperate lunge, Joshua buried his blade in Craxus's chest, while Taurus's sword found the Iridian's throat. As Craxus fell, the remaining Iridian forces scattered, their will to fight broken by the loss of their commander. Joshua and Taurus stood amidst the carnage, their chests heaving with exertion. They exchanged a look of respect and camaraderie, knowing that this victory was just the first step in a much larger war. But for now they had saved the colonists and struck a blow against Zorgax's plans, and that was enough. Joshua turned to Taurus, a grin spreading across his face. "Not bad for a human and a traitor, eh?" Taurus snorted, but there was a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Not bad at all, Joshua. Perhaps there is hope for our species yet." As the Marines secured the area and tended to the wounded, Joshua couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and purpose. He had started this mission as a lone warrior, fighting for survival in a hostile universe. But now he had found an ally and a friend in the most unlikely of places. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by their shared desire for peace and justice in a galaxy torn apart by war and strife. As the smoke cleared from the battle on the moon, Joshua and Taurus stood amidst the ruins, their eyes meeting with a shared understanding. The fight against Zorgax was far from over. They wasted no time scouring the Iridian command center for any intel on Zorgax's plans. What they found sent a chill down Joshua's spine. Zorgax had been secretly amassing a massive armada of Iridian warships, far larger than any fleet previously seen. The madman intended to invade human space itself. Joshua immediately contacted his superiors, relaying the dire news. But to his shock, they brushed off his warnings. The human leadership remained convinced that the Iridians were too fractured to pose a real threat. Joshua slammed his fist on the console in frustration. Taurus placed a clawed hand on Joshua's shoulder. "We cannot wait for them to see reason. We must act now." Joshua nodded, his resolve hardening. Together they began to plan their next move. They would need hard evidence of Zorgax's intentions and the support of allies to stand against him. Their first target was a heavily guarded Iridian stronghold, rumored to house a trove of data on Zorgax's fleet movements. Joshua and Taurus infiltrated the compound under the cover of darkness, their skills honed by their time fighting together. They slipped past the perimeter guards, taking them out with quick, silent precision. Inside the stronghold, they split up, each taking a different section to search for the data they needed. Joshua crept through the dimly lit corridors, his rifle at the ready. He reached the central data hub, his fingers flying over the alien controls as he downloaded the files. But as he worked, he heard the telltale hiss of a blade being drawn behind him. He spun, bringing his rifle up just in time to block a vicious slash from an Iridian assassin. The creature was a blur of scales and blades, moving with unnatural speed and agility. Joshua fell back, barely keeping ahead of the assassin's strikes. Their fight spilled out into the corridor, the sounds of their clash echoing through the stronghold. Joshua gritted his teeth, his muscles burning as he fended off the relentless assault. Then he heard Taurus's roar from down the hall, followed by the clash of blades. The Iridian warrior had run into trouble of his own. Joshua redoubled his efforts, forcing the assassin back with a flurry of blows. He needed to end this fast and get to Taurus. With a final, desperate lunge, he drove his combat knife into the assassin's throat, the blade finding a gap in the creature's armor. As the assassin fell, Joshua sprinted down the corridor towards the sounds of fighting. He burst into a large chamber to find Taurus locked in combat with 3 more assassins, their blades flashing in the dim light. Joshua leapt into the fray, his rifle spitting fire as he took down one of the assassins with a burst to the head. Side by side, he and Taurus fought like demons, their movements perfectly synchronized as they cut down their foes. As the last assassin fell, Joshua and Taurus stood panting, their armor scorched and splattered with alien blood. Joshua held up the data drive, a grim smile on his face. "Let's hope this was worth it." They pored over the stolen files, the full extent of Zorgax's plan becoming clear. The Iridian tyrant had built a fleet that rivaled any in the galaxy, with hundreds of warships and thousands of soldiers. The data also revealed the locations of key staging points and supply lines vital to Zorgax's invasion. But as they dug deeper, they discovered something even more disturbing. Zorgax had somehow acquired advanced human weapons and technology, far beyond anything the Iridians should have had access to. The implications were clear. Zorgax had human allies, traitors who were supplying him with the means to conquer humanity. Joshua's jaw clenched as he stared at the evidence. This changed everything. They weren't just fighting a war against Zorgax anymore. They were fighting to root out a cancer within their own species, one that threatened to destroy them all from within. Taurus saw the look in Joshua's eyes and nodded. "We will find these traitors and bring them to justice. But first, we must rally our own allies." They set out to gather support, reaching out to Iridian clans who had grown tired of Zorgax's brutal rule. Many were hesitant at first, but when they saw the evidence of Zorgax's plans, they quickly pledged their support. One of the most valuable allies they gained was Raxus, Taurus's old mentor and leader of an elite group of Iridian warriors. Raxus had long opposed Zorgax's tyranny, and he brought with him a wealth of knowledge and resources that would be invaluable in the fight ahead. But even as their coalition grew, Joshua and Taurus knew they were racing against time. Zorgax's assassins dogged their every step, forcing them to constantly stay on the move. They narrowly escaped death more times than they could count, their skills and instincts pushed to the limit. Yet through it all their bond only grew stronger. The human and the Iridian, two warriors from different worlds, united by a common cause and an unbreakable friendship. They knew that the road ahead would be long and bloody, filled with untold dangers and impossible odds. But they also knew that they would face it together, no matter the cost. For the sake of their species, their families, and the future of the galaxy itself, they would fight on, until Zorgax and his twisted vision were nothing more than a bitter memory. Joshua and Taurus moved swiftly through the shadows of the Iridian stronghold, their hearts pounding with the knowledge that they were closing in on Zorgax's human collaborators. The air was thick with tension as they approached the secret meeting room, their weapons at the ready. But as they entered the chamber, they found themselves face to face with Zorgax himself, flanked by a dozen of his most elite warriors. The human traitors were there too, their faces twisted with fear and anger as they realized they had been discovered. "So the great Joshua Reed and his pet Iridian have come to stop me," Zorgax sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "I'm afraid you're too late. My armada is ready, and soon the human worlds will fall before me." Joshua's grip tightened on his rifle, his eyes narrowing. "Not if we have anything to say about it," he growled. And then all hell broke loose. Zorgax's warriors opened fire, their energy weapons searing the air as Joshua and Taurus dove for cover. They fought back with everything they had, their movements a blur of speed and precision as they cut down their foes. But there were too many of them. Taurus let out a cry of pain as an energy bolt caught him in the side, sending him sprawling to the ground. Joshua's heart leapt into his throat as he saw his friend fall, but he didn't have time to think. He just reacted, throwing himself in front of Taurus and laying down a barrage of covering fire. The human traitors were fleeing now, their cowardice outweighing their loyalty to Zorgax. Joshua's mind raced as he realized he had a choice to make. He could go after them, try to stop them before they could warn the other collaborators, or he could stay with Taurus, fight off Zorgax's warriors, and try to get his friend to safety. There was no choice at all. Joshua gritted his teeth and stood his ground, his rifle spitting death as he shielded Taurus with his own body. Wave after wave of Zorgax's guards poured into the room, their weapons flashing as they tried to overwhelm the human warrior. But Joshua would not be moved. He fought like a man possessed, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination as he held the line. He could hear Taurus's labored breathing behind him, could feel the Iridian's blood soaking into his armor, but he would not let his friend die. Not here, not like this. Just as it seemed that all hope was lost, a mighty roar echoed through the chamber. Raxus and his warriors had arrived, their blades flashing as they tore into Zorgax's forces from behind. The tide turned in an instant, the Iridian reinforcements cutting a path through the enemy ranks. Joshua seized the moment, gathering Taurus in his arms and making a desperate dash for the exit. Raxus and his warriors covered their escape, their blood mingling with that of their fallen comrades, as they fought to the last. Somehow they made it out of the stronghold alive, but the cost had been high. Many of Raxus's warriors had fallen, their bodies left behind in the chaos of the battle. And Taurus was fading fast, his wounds too severe for even his Iridian physiology to heal. Joshua's heart was heavy as he carried his friend to safety, his mind racing with the knowledge that time was running out. They had the evidence they needed now, the proof of Zorgax's treachery and the human collaborators who had aided him. But would it be enough? With a heavy heart, Joshua made his way back to the human leadership, his armor still stained with Taurus's blood. He pleaded with them, showing them the evidence they had gathered, the records of the secret meetings and the stolen technology. He poured out his heart, telling them of the sacrifices that had been made, the lives that had been lost. And finally they listened, faced with the undeniable truth of Zorgax's plans and the treachery of their own kind. The human forces mobilized. A massive fleet was assembled, the most powerful warships in the human arsenal brought to bear against the Iridian threat. The battle that followed was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The human fleet clashed with Zorgax's armada. In a titanic struggle, the void of space lit up with the fire of 1,000 suns. Ships burned and died, their crews consumed by the flames of war. At the heart of the battle, Joshua led a desperate boarding action onto Zorgax's flagship, his eyes burning with a righteous fury as he fought his way to the bridge. There he confronted the Iridian tyrant, their blades clashing in a dance of death. It was a battle for the ages, a clash of wills and ideals that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Joshua fought with a skill and ferocity that shocked even Zorgax, his blade a blur of motion as he pressed the attack. In the end, it was Joshua who emerged victorious, his sword finding its mark in Zorgax's black heart. But even as the Iridian tyrant fell, Joshua felt a searing pain in his own chest. He looked down to see a jagged blade protruding from his armor, the hilt clasped in Zorgax's dying grip. But before the blow could fall, a figure hurled itself in front of Joshua, taking the blade meant for him. It was Taurus, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination as he gave his life for his friend. Joshua cradled Taurus in his arms as the life faded from the Iridian's eyes, his heart breaking with the knowledge of what had been lost. Around them, the remnants of Zorgax's armada were fleeing, the human traitors being rounded up and brought to justice. But for Joshua, none of it mattered. He had lost his friend, his brother in arms, and the pain of that loss was almost too much to bear. In the days that followed, the Iridian clans came together to rebuild, to forge a new path forward in the wake of Zorgax's tyranny. And Joshua was there, working tirelessly to build bridges between the two races, to honor the memory of the friend he had lost. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be many challenges and obstacles to overcome. But he also knew that it was a road worth walking, a struggle worth fighting for. For in the end, it was not about humans or Iridians, not about the differences that divided them. It was about something deeper, something more fundamental. It was about the bonds of friendship, the ties of brotherhood that could unite even the most unlikely of allies. It was about the power of sacrifice, the willingness to lay down one's life for something greater than oneself. And as Joshua looked to the stars, he knew that he would carry that lesson with him for the rest of his days, a beacon of hope in a galaxy still torn by war and strife. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.